In the lead-up to the August 15, 2025, Alaska summit between U.S. President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, skepticism is growing among Ukraine's defenders, US and European allies, and geopolitical analysts over whether Trump could once again be outmaneuvered by the Russian leader's diplomatic tactics. Coverage from major outlets reveals a pattern of praise, skepticism, and sudden shifts toward tones in Trump's rhetoric, raising questions about his strategic reliability and vulnerability to influence. As Trump prepares to meet Putin in Anchorage, critics warned of the consequences if he is swayed by the Russian leader's charm offensive. Putin has publicly lauded US efforts at de-escalation, signaling openness to nuclear arms control and economic cooperation. Trump, projecting confidence, has hinted at a possible follow-up summit involving Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and European leaders, but not necessarily at the same table. Western officials worry Trump might be tempted by broader deals, possibly including territorial concessions such as recognizing Russian control over Donbas, in exchange for promises of peace or economic incentives. Observers draw parallels to past encounters like the 2018 Helsinki meeting, where Trump appeared deferential to Putin, raising alarms about weak US positioning and a disregard for intelligence assessments. Analysts say Putin's strategy of flattery, myth-making, and delay is designed to exploit Trump's desire for personal rapport and public acclaim. Opinion writers have likened the scenario to Neville Chamberlain's appeasement of Hitler, warning that peace but with territorial compromise could mirror the missteps that preceded World War II. These voices urge Trump to resist any superficial peace offers and insist on terms that protect Ukrainian sovereignty and NATO's credibility. Trump's rhetoric has shifted in recent months. Early in his second term he spoke admiringly of Putin and emphasized his willingness to engage. As the war dragged on and Putin's objectives became clearer, Trump's tone grew more critical. He authorized military aid to Ukraine, aggressors. Yet uncertainty remains about whether this tougher stance is genuine or merely a tactical posture that could crumble in the face of a flashy diplomatic gesture. In Ukraine, skepticism is intense. Civilians, soldiers, and officials fear Putin will exploit Trump's desire to be seen as a deal-maker to secure territorial gains without truly ending hostilities. Russia's continued operations in Donetsk reinforce the concern that ceding territory could enable further strategic advances and embolden future aggression. Ukrainian voices emphasize the principle of nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine, warning that decisions taken without Kiev's participation would be illegitimate and dangerous. Analysts outline several reasons Trump could be fooled again. His reliance on personal chemistry over methodical analysis makes him susceptible to influence from skilled manipulators like Putin. The Russian leader may offer symbolic concessions such as headline-grabbing arms talks or trade deals to distract from the core issue of Ukraine's territorial integrity. Excluding Ukraine from direct negotiations also increases the risk of an agreement that looks diplomatic but lacks substance. Patterns from Trump's earlier presidency, trusting Putin's denials over US intelligence and favoring spectacle over substance, raised fears that his approach remains unchanged despite shifts in tone. The risks extend beyond Ukraine. If Trump were to agree to concessions that legitimize Russian territorial claims, it could fracture Western unity, embolden other authoritarian powers, and undermine the rules-based international order. European allies have expressed concern that such a deal could weaken NATO's deterrence and encourage further land grabs in other regions. For Ukraine, losing control over parts of its territory in exchange for a ceasefire would undermine sovereignty and validate aggressive realpolitik. For Trump, a poorly received deal could damage his domestic credibility, energizing opponents and alienating supporters who expect him to project strength on the world stage. The Alaska Summit too stands as a high-stakes test of Trump's diplomatic judgment. Supporters of a hard line argue he must reject any arrangement that compromises Ukraine's independence, maintain or increase sanctions, and coordinate closely with NATO. Others, favoring a quick end to the war, may pressure him to accept a pragmatic settlement even if it leaves parts of Ukraine under Russian control. The choice will reveal whether Trump has learned from past missteps or remains susceptible to the personal diplomacy that has characterized his relationship with Putin. Putin's long-standing ability to manipulate perceptions, combined with his control over Russia's narrative at home, ensures he will enter the talks well prepared to achieve his objectives without making significant concessions. His playbook relies on creating the appearance of compromise while securing tangible strategic gains. For Trump, avoiding another Helsinki moment will require resisting the temptation to claim an easy victory and instead focusing on verifiable, enforceable terms that preserve the security of US allies. The outcome will shape not only the course of the war in Ukraine but also the credibility of democratic alliances confronting authoritarian challenges. Allies in Europe and Asia will watch closely to see whether the United States can maintain a consistent and principled stance against territorial aggression. The summit's legacy will depend on whether it produces a genuine step toward peace or becomes another example of style over substance in high-level diplomacy.